Welcome to Get Mad. I'm Mad Hildebrandt, and today our guest is Kim Stewart. Kim is the Democratic Party candidate for sheriff in Dona County. We're really excited to have her here with us today. So welcome, Kim.
Thank you, Mad. This is a great opportunity to reach out to additional voters in Dona.
It really is. And let me ask you at the beginning of the show to just tell a little bit about yourself and your district, just for all of our viewers, so that they know who you are.
Well, I'm a retiree of California law enforcement, and I moved over to this beautiful section of the United States about 12 years ago, ostensibly to retire, and that never really materialized. So here I am today running for sheriff. The situation for me was I was hired in 2008 as an internal affairs investigator for the county. I worked for them for a period of a couple of years. And I've had a lot of interaction with the county in the last decade. So it informed me about where I saw a need to become involved and become active. Our county is, as you may well know, the size and area of Delaware. It's a huge area to cover, but thankfully, we only have about 200,000 people in our county, and about 100,000 of those are served by local law enforcement, either Las Cruces PD, Hatch, Anthony, and Sunland Park. Now, the areas that are unincorporated fall to the responsibility of the Sheriff's Department. So we still have quite a bit of demand. We also have about 50 miles that we share with Mexico.
Okay, great. So yeah, I mean, I've spent a lot of time down in Dona, and I've also spent a lot of time in law enforcement. That is what I did while I was in the military. So I was reading some of these things that you're talking about, and really with quite a bit of interest. So one of the things that I'm very interested in is your idea of embracing the idea of community policing, because that is something that you see people begin, or the various departments across the country begin to do, and then it's like a couple of guys go out there and everybody else is still just cops as usual.
We pull back.
Yes. So talk about that.
Well, first of all, the word you used, embracing, is a great word to describe my vision for community policing. In the United States, about 90% of departments do have components of community policing. So they do what I call the cafeteria plan. They put officers in high schools, or they put them on bike patrol, or they have a special agricultural unit or something like that. And then they say, we are a community policing agency. Not so. There are a few in the country who really reorganize around that premise. And it is a philosophy, so it overlays on whether you're urban, rural. It takes on the form of what your communities want. So it's a very flexible vision. But in order to partner fully with the county citizens and constituents and organizations and other agencies, we have to do an internal transformation. I can't very well send out deputies and say, go community police. Number one, we have to have a concrete example to line deputies of what that is and what it means. We also have to give them the time to do it. If we are evaluating them on how many arrests they make and how many citations they make, we're certainly not giving them credit for maybe dropping in at a school play at elementary school, or attending an evening meeting of the NAACP or a Veterans Association meeting. We are not respecting the fact that line deputies and line personnel completely, whether they're sworn or unsworn, really know the community. And they have to become the experts that we in upper management look to for feedback on what they need. So in a full transformation, management becomes facilitator. We give what line deputies and line personnel need to serve our constituents. So you can see it's not an easy undertaking. And that's often why, in my opinion, agencies often retract from the full concept of community policing.
Oh, right. And that makes a lot of sense. And one of the things that always disturbed me was this idea that kind of came out, maybe it was in the 70s from television, but this idea that the cop sitting in the donut shop eating donuts was and spending time talking to the community was not doing his job or her job. And that, I think, really kind of put a halt to the idea of police in the community and just being one of everybody walking around the street. And
it was a transformation because of technology and transportation. You know, way back, we had beat officers walking the beats. They go to call boxes, right? They intimately knew their neighborhoods and their communities. Well, we got the technology to have a radio, and we got vehicles that were accessible. So it was all of a sudden, this is great. We're just going to respond to calls. So we spent about 20 years just being, not just, but primarily focusing on call responders. And that is what ultimately pulled us away from that one-on-one. And as you say, that period of time where people's officers spent with talking with community members, whether it be shopkeepers or people in the donut stores, those are valuable contacts that we began as a profession to kind of give short shrift to. And that was where we kind of went, as often things do, to one extreme to the other. So I think we have to find a middle ground to come back. And going forward in the United States, I think you would agree, my profession needs some changes in how we deal with issues in the community. They're more complex, for one thing.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And so one of the problems I know that I've seen as I've talked to police departments and sheriff's departments around the second district while I was running is the idea of recruitment and retention of new officers. So can you talk about what your plans are in that area for your sheriff's department?
Yeah, the issue of recruitment nationwide is actually not, most agencies have issues with recruitment. And part of that is when the economy gets good, it's much like the military. When the economy gets good, volunteerism to the military goes down, and the same is true with pursuing public service type jobs. Because of course they aren't the highest paying jobs, and there are maybe other opportunities. That said, community policing requires that we really cast a wider net for recruits. In addition to meeting the high standards to be in law enforcement, we need to look to people who can solve problems and really can begin to think on a wider scale about how I, as a line deputy, could solve this issue that maybe has yet to materialize into a crime. We also need to recruit for good communicators. Really, if you think about it, community policing is really going to demand that we explain our actions, and we're as transparent with the county constituents as possible. And that requires more than maybe just the thing of, I'm wearing the badge and therefore I say so, so therefore it is. Sometimes I think a little explaining can go a long way to really bridge gaps in how the public sees us and how we see the public. Spend the time to do that in a variety of ways. So let's cast a wider net. Let's recruit continuously. Currently, the sheriff's department does not do that. I'm not sure why, if it's a financial issue only. But again, if we're going to go to full community policing, we're going to have to redirect funds in the budget. We're going to have to redirect them to the lowest people to be, not the lowest, but the line personnel to be fully trained above the standard, not to meet the standard, and to begin to spend money in terms of outreach.
Right.
You can't recruit once a year for 2 weeks or a month and say, well, that's it. We did the situation. Also, just to add, we have issues here with not attracting enough fire service personnel. We have issues with not attracting enough detention center personnel. They always struggle as well. And my idea was, let's look at a path, perhaps a technical path for people to get into public service, either as a firefighter initially, a detention officer second, maybe a deputy third, and we're giving them preferential status going forward to go through this particular chain of training and service.
Oh yeah, that sounds like really kind of an exciting new way to do that, because I don't know that anybody's doing something similar. So that's something I could really get behind. So as we're moving forward in our time, let's talk a little bit here about your plans for auditing your department, and just talk a little bit about that.
Well, my background in law enforcement was in fraud, corruption, and money laundering. So I come to the job of sheriff with an eye to a lot of detail about the need to be not only transparent to the public, but internally. I sat on the Internal Audit Advisory Committee for the county for this last year. And though that experience did not involve the sheriff's department, it caused me to realize that the sheriff's department in recent memory, at least over a decade, has never been audited. And to me, that seems mandatory. In fact, best practices normally are in a lot of areas of the country. When one elected official goes out and another comes in, triggers an automatic audit. Because if I'm going to sign, I need to know what I'm signing for and taking responsibility for. But beyond that, we need to have a full understanding of what comprises our budget, right? What are the nuts and bolts of our budget, and where is our money being spent? And that's not going to be possible unless I have a true picture of the accounting of the department.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that makes a lot of sense. And I know, in this state particularly, when we talk about just what's happening statewide, and talking about the rape kits and all these things that were not being audited and then were not being followed through on. And so it makes a lot of sense to just start looking back at what has been done and what should be looked at and what can be done from now on, and also just how much money you have, how much, all of those things. It just makes so much sense to take stock of where we're standing.
It's a responsible action, but it's, as you say, I think it can take us away from, well, we've always done it that way. Sometimes the way we've always done it has simply been wrong. And I think it starts us on a path to kind of clear the decks and to begin to understand going forward really what kind of shape we're in.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. So speaking of what sort of shape people are in, I'm a veteran, and a lot of my viewers happen to be veterans. And so I would like to give you a moment to speak to the veterans and talk to them about what you, in a position like being the sheriff, how your approach to veterans is going to be shaped up.
Well, I think there's two sides to that. There's the side of recruitment. I'm not going to age myself too much here, but I worked with Vietnam veterans, and I worked with veterans returning from Desert Storm. And of course, for recruiting in law enforcement, that expertise is a huge um, benefit to our county. It brings, not only the experience, but the public service aspect. I think it really, that's where you see that veteran um, background really reflected. You see their outreach to the community tends to, they get it, in other words, right away. So that's attractive. I think on the flip side of that, and it ties into mental health issues as well, we do have a number of situations where we will run into veterans who are suffering and are not getting the help they need, or perhaps have not followed through with help that was available. And one thing about community policing, it's not a situation where we just show up and say, hey, is everybody okay? Nobody's, fighting. We're going to leave. See you later. We take on a role in the community to hopefully link people to service. So we're, in our role, we're going to be learning, and I've spent 10 months actually already doing some of this, where I learn what's out there. My undersheriff will learn what organizations are available, etc. And that goes all the way down to the sergeants and lieutenants. And when we go out on calls as first responders, essentially, we're not going to just knock on the door once. If we see there's an issue, we can come back at another time and say, hey, sir, I recognize that you're a veteran, and that are you aware of these particular services? So I see us as really being an additional link in that important chain, because you and I know we end up in conflicts with people who are having serious problems, and neither side of that coin often works out well. It's like someone with mental health in the United States organization told me recently, when you meet people with issues, it's never a good day. You never meet them on a good day. It's always a bad day. So I think it's with veterans in particular, I can see both sides of that, where we can be of benefit on one end, and they can benefit us as people leaving the military.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that. And now we're getting right to the end of the program. So at this point, I would like you to speak directly to your voters and also tell them what your website is and how they can donate to you so that they can get you elected.
My candidacy is truly different and apart from my opponent. I don't think it could be clearer that my opponent is about the past and I'm about the future. I'm about looking at issues on a much wider scale, using the Sheriff's Department platform to truly benefit the people of Dona. And as I've traversed our county, I've met a number of people who believe now is the time to look at another way forward. So I tell people, if that's your belief, that we're at a great time in our history, so to speak, to move forward, I encourage them to join me on this mission. It will not be overnight. It will truly take probably most of my term, but I guarantee that they will begin to see some changes in as little as a quarter of the year. So that said, please go to Stewart for Sheriff, Stewart number 4, sheriff.com, and read my background and read my ideas about a variety of topics. As I like to say, I write all my own material. Nobody's putting those words on paper for me, so I believe them. We have a very active and busy Facebook, Stewart for Sheriff. Also, you can see our upcoming events and where we will be out and meeting the public. Finally, we are 3 weeks away Mine has truly been a grassroots candidacy. We need 3 weeks of donations to get us through the November 6th, and I thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having been here. Thank you, everybody, for watching this show, and I hope you go out there and take a look at this candidate for sheriff in Dona Ana. And thank you, Kim Stewart for sheriff. Thank you for being here.